January 16, 1943, somewhere over the Solomon Islands. At 20,000 feet, the air thins to a fragile calm. Twin engines hum in perfect harmony, their propeller arcs carving silver halos through the dawn beneath the canopy. Lieutenant Dick Bong adjusts his oxygen mask, eyes locked on the rising sun. Behind him, another P-38 Lightning matches his every movement, a mirror of aluminum and resolve. The radio crackles, barely audible over the roar. Enemy fighter Zeros are climbing fast from the east. Bong pushes the throttles forward, and the Lightning surges ahead, its long, slender booms slicing the air like twin spears. Seconds later, tracers streak across the sky. One Zero bursts into flame. Then another. The duel lasts barely a minute. As the smoke drifts away, the Lightning banks toward base, sunlight glinting off its polished skin. 2 engines, 1 pilot, and an idea that changed aviation forever. Because the man who made the P-38 possible wasn't even a pilot. He was an engineer, named Clarence Kelly Johnson. Long before the Lightning ever cut through Pacific skies, America's aviation landscape was a place of restless experimentation. It was the late 1930s, a time when the world teetered between peace and inevitable war. Nations were arming faster than ever, and the future of aerial combat was being shaped not by generals, but by engineers. At Lockheed Aircraft Corporation in Burbank, California, a small team of designers worked inside a cramped hangar known simply as the Skunk Works. Among them stood a young engineer barely in his 30s, Clarence Leonard Kelly Johnson. Tall, sharp-eyed, and impossibly demanding, Johnson had never been a pilot, but what he lacked in flying hours, he replaced with an uncompromising instinct for design. Johnson saw what few others did. The fighter of tomorrow would need both speed and range. The single-engine fighters of the day, the Curtiss P-36, the Seversky P-35, were limited, their endurance short, their firepower modest. Johnson imagined something radical, a twin-engine, high-altitude interceptor that could outclimb, outrun, and outgun anything in the sky. In February 1937, the United States Army Air Corps issued a request for a new pursuit aircraft, one capable of reaching 360 miles per hour and climbing to 20,000 feet in 6 minutes. Most thought the requirement was impossible, but Lockheed, under Johnson's guidance, submitted a concept so unconventional it looked like science fiction: a central pod for the pilot and armament, flanked by 2 long booms housing engines and tail assemblies. This strange, fork-tailed design would become the XP-38. When Army officials first saw the model, they were skeptical. It was unlike anything built before, part fighter, part bomber, part experiment. Yet, buried in Johnson's equations and aerodynamic sketches was an understanding of airflow that would later define American air superiority. The twin-engine layout reduced drag while offering safety. If one engine failed, the aircraft could still return home, and the concentrated nose armament meant no convergence problems. Every bullet met at the exact point of aim. In December 1938, the prototype was approved for construction. Johnson's small team worked relentlessly, sometimes sleeping in the hangar, using slide rules and intuition more than computers or data. Within months, the sleek aluminum prototype stood ready on the runway at March Field, California. Its shape caught the sunlight like a blade. The first flight, on January 27, 1939, was brief but extraordinary. Test pilot Ben Kelsey lifted the XP-38 into the clear sky, feeling its unique stability and raw power. A few days later, he attempted a record-breaking transcontinental flight to prove its worth. From California to New York, it almost succeeded. But as the Lightning approached Mitchell Field, freezing temperatures thickened the carburetors. Both engines failed on final approach. The aircraft crashed short of the runway, Damaged beyond repair, Kelsey survived, and so did the idea. The crash could have ended the project, but instead, it became legend. The XP-38 had flown across the continent faster than any fighter before it. The Army Air Corps took notice, contracts followed, production began. By mid-1940, with war spreading across Europe, the P-38 was evolving from a radical prototype into a production machine. Johnson refined every detail, from the turbo superchargers that gave it unmatched altitude performance to the distinctive twin-boom tail that balanced its powerful engines. To the untrained eye, it looked complex, even over-engineered, but to Johnson, every curve served purpose. "A good airplane," he once said, "has no unnecessary parts." In that philosophy lay the birth of an icon. The Lightning wasn't just another aircraft. It was the first American fighter to exceed 400 miles per hour. The first capable of crossing oceans, and the only one that would remain in frontline service from Pearl Harbor to Victory Day. And all of it began with the mind of a man who'd never flown combat, yet understood flight better than anyone alive. As Europe burned and the Pacific simmered, the world was about to discover what Kelly Johnson's strange twin-boom creation could truly do. By late 1941, war had engulfed Europe, and soon, the Pacific, the P-38 Lightning, was no longer a prototype, but a promise. America's high-altitude, long-range answer to an increasingly desperate world. Yet its early service was far from perfect. When the first production models reached Army squadrons, pilots found the aircraft demanding. Its engines were powerful but temperamental. Its controls stiff at high speeds. Compressibility, a mysterious aerodynamic effect that struck when diving near Mach 068, caused several crashes at altitude. The cockpit froze. In the tropics, it became an oven for an untested design born in peacetime. The Lightning was a paradox, too advanced for its moment, yet exactly what the future would demand. Lockheed's engineers raced to fix the problems. Johnson, now head of advanced design, oversaw each modification personally, adjusting dive flaps, refining cooling systems, and redesigning control surfaces. He listened to pilot reports with surgical attention. Every crash report, every bent wing became a blueprint for improvement. When America entered the war after Pearl Harbor, the P-38 was still finding its footing, but in one crucial way. It was irreplaceable. It had the range. No other American fighter could escort bombers deep into enemy territory or patrol the vast Pacific distances between islands. The twin Allison engines gave it both reach and resilience. One could fail, and the Lightning would still bring its pilot home. As U-boats prowled the Atlantic and Japanese Zeros dominated the Pacific, the Lightning quietly began to prove itself. In 1942, P-38s operated from Iceland, intercepting German reconnaissance aircraft far out over the North Atlantic, missions that no other fighter could attempt. In August that same year, they flew their first combat sortie in the Pacific, strafing Japanese positions in New Guinea. The results were immediate. The Lightning's combination of speed, climb rate, and heavy armament, 450 caliber machine guns and a 20mm cannon mounted in its nose, made it lethal in head-on engagements. Enemy pilots, accustomed to short-range single-engine fighters, found themselves outmatched in both reach and power. Yet it wasn't just performance that made the P-38 revolutionary. It represented a new idea of warfare, one where range, reliability, and altitude defined dominance. Johnson's design philosophy had given America a weapon suited for a global war. Still, acceptance came slowly in Europe. Some pilots complained that P-38's cockpit heating was inadequate at 30,000 feet. That its handling required constant vigilance. British test pilots found its high-altitude performance lacking compared to the Spitfire's agility, but commanders saw its potential. The Lightning could go where others couldn't, and stay there longer. By 1943, Production ramped up. Thousands of P-38s rolled out of Lockheed's Burbank plant, sleek, twin-tailed silhouettes gleaming under the California sun. Aircraft's presence soon defined the skies of the Pacific and North Africa, from intercepting Italian transports over the Mediterranean to covering bombers over Rabaul. The Lightning was everywhere. At the same time, its creator continued to refine it. Johnson's approach was relentless: speed without sacrifice, innovation without guesswork. He pushed his engineers and mechanics beyond exhaustion. "Be quick," he said, "but don't hurry." It became the unspoken motto of Skunk Works, a philosophy that would later produce the U-2, SR-71, and F-117. But in 1943, his obsession had only one focus: perfecting the Lightning. And it was in that year, amid the jungles and coral skies of the Pacific, that the P-38 found its destiny. The very idea that had begun on a sketchpad in California would soon alter the course of air combat, because when the U.S. needed to strike deep behind enemy lines, when they needed precision and power at impossible range, one aircraft, born of one man's unorthodox mind, answered. The Lightning was about to make history. Clarence Kelly Johnson had never flown in combat. He didn't feel the rush of a dogfight, nor the terror of tracer fire slicing past a canopy, yet, paradoxically, that distance gave him clarity where pilots thought in seconds. Johnson thought in systems: airflow, stress load, material limits. In the 1930s, military aviation was dominated by instinct. Pilots told engineers what they wanted. Engineers obeyed. Johnson reversed that relationship. He believed design should teach pilots what was possible. His engineering wasn't about comfort, it was about redefining limits. He walked the flight lines with a notebook, observing not just aircraft, but human habits. He noticed that pilots often overcorrected single-engine fighters when damaged. Losing control, he imagined a plane that forgave mistakes, that could fly home on one engine. He listened to reports of bomber escorts running low on fuel, forced to abandon their formations. That's when the Lightning's range became a necessity, not a luxury. Johnson's genius wasn't invention, it was integration. Every element of the P-38 worked toward one goal: sustained power at altitude, the turbo superchargers, the central nacelle, the counter-rotating propellers. All of it served balance and endurance. When test pilots reported that the plane felt different, Johnson took it as success. Different was the point. He was designing for the skies of tomorrow, and tomorrow came faster than anyone expected. In the Pacific, distance killed as surely as bullets. Islands lay hundreds of miles apart, and airfields were scattered like stepping stones across vast oceans. Fighters like the P-40, Warhawk, and F-4F Wildcat could barely reach the front lines in return, but the Lightning could, and did. With a combat radius exceeding 1,000 miles, the P-38 became the first true long-range escort fighter. It could climb to 35,000 feet, strike and escort bombers deep into enemy territory. The Japanese, used to short-range defense, suddenly faced a predator that appeared where no fighter should. Its twin engines allowed it to loiter over targets, to dive, strike, and vanish, a style of warfare built on patience rather than proximity. Pilots learned to climb high, stay hidden in the sun, and pounce in pairs. The Lightning's concentrated nose guns, 450 calibers and 120 millimeters cannon, meant every round hit precisely where the gun sight aimed. There was no convergence to calculate, no guesswork. Major Dick Bong, who would become America's top ace with 40 victories, credited this design for his success. "You pointed it," he said, "and you hit it." In an age before radar-guided missiles, that precision was revolutionary. The P-38 turned the Pacific's immensity into a battlefield within reach. It hunted bombers over Rabaul, strafed supply convoys near Bougainville, and struck command posts so deep behind enemy lines that the Japanese initially believed they were being attacked by multiple aircraft types. It wasn't just a plane. It was a shift in doctrine, proof that technology could extend the reach of strategy itself. Every innovation comes with ghosts, unseen problems that haunt the drawing board. For Johnson, that ghost was compressibility. At high speeds, the Lightning's nose would shake violently, controls freezing as if locked in place. Pilots described the sensation as hitting an invisible wall, a barrier between flight and death. This phenomenon, now understood as transonic compressibility, was barely known in the early 1940s. Reports poured in, aircraft lost in dives, wings buckled, pilots killed without warning. Johnson faced the nightmare of every engineer, a perfect design that hid a fatal flaw. He refused to surrender, working with NACA, the predecessor of NASA. Lockheed engineers began testing new dive recovery flaps and modified tailplane angles by late 1943. They had a solution: small deployable dive flaps that restored control at high speeds. The Lightning could now dive past 500 miles per hour safely, faster than any Allied fighter in the sky. That victory was quiet but monumental. It marked one of the first deliberate confrontations with transonic flight, an early step toward the jet age, and it came from the same mind that had drawn the Lightning's first sketch on a scrap of paper 6 years earlier. Johnson had built an aircraft that taught the world how to fly faster and lived to tell about it. As the Lightning matured, so too did its reputation, from North Africa to the Pacific, from icy intercepts over Iceland to the humid chaos of Guadalcanal. It was proving itself across every climate, every front. And yet, its true legend was about to be written, not in a dogfight, but in a mission so precise, so daring, that even Johnson himself could not have imagined the role his creation would play. Dogfights had always been personal, spinning duels of reflex and nerve. But the Lightning changed that dynamic. It wasn't built for turn fights or elegant aerial ballet. It was a predator, a machine designed to stalk, strike, and disappear before the enemy knew it was there. Its sheer speed and climb rate turned engagements into ambush. P-38 pilots developed a new rhythm of attack. Altitude first, surprise second, speed always. They'd dive from the sun, guns blazing, then climb away before slower fighters could react. It was a style that broke with the traditions of early war air combat. Less duel, more execution. The aircraft's heavy nose-mounted guns meant that even a short burst could shred a bomber or fighter in seconds. Japanese pilots, who once dominated the Pacific skies with their nimble Mitsubishi Zeros, soon found themselves overpowered. The Zero could outearn the Lightning, but it could never outrun or outclimb it. The Lightning rewrote the rule book. Pilots no longer fought for survival. They fought on their terms. It was this combination of design and doctrine that elevated men like Major Richard Bong, Thomas Maguire, and Charles MacDonald into legends. Their success wasn't just courage. It was the expression of Kelly Johnson's design philosophy in motion. Power, endurance, precision. To enemy pilots, the twin tails of the Lightning became an omen. To American flyers, they were wings of deliverance. From the ground, Japanese soldiers described the Lightning as two airplanes flying too close together. From the cockpit, it looked even stranger, a metallic predator glinting in the sunlight, splitting the sky in half. Early encounters shocked the Japanese command. Pilots who had dominated the skies since Pearl Harbor suddenly faced an opponent that could dictate every fight. Reports from Rabaul, Buna, and the Solomon spoke of twin-engine fighters that climbed beyond reach. The Japanese Zero, for all its agility, lacked armor and self-sealing fuel tanks. The Lightning exploited those weaknesses mercilessly. It dove in fast, fired from beyond return range, and climbed away untouched. Even the famed A-6M aces of the Imperial Navy began to avoid one-on-one fights with the P-38, preferring surprise or ambush instead. Captured Japanese documents later revealed a grudging respect. They called it the two-headed dragon. Its presence forced them to change tactics, scattering their formations. Lowering altitude, avoiding vertical climbs in psychological terms. The Lightning wasn't just a weapon. It was a disturbance in the rhythm of air war itself. Every innovation reshapes its enemy. The Lightning made even the most confident adversaries doubt their own sky. Beneath the glory lay exhaustion, long missions over endless ocean. Hours of radio silence, eyes scanning blue emptiness for a flicker of movement. This was the life of a Lightning pilot. They carried extra canteens of water, survival kits, and sometimes chocolate bars to stay awake during missions that lasted 7, even 8 hours when engines coughed or fuel gauges dropped too fast. The cockpit became a coffin of solitude in those moments. Faith in the machine was all that kept them calm. The Lightning's twin engines saved countless lives. Pilots returned with holes in one wing, engines dead, controls sluggish, and still made it home. One veteran recalled flying 400 miles on a single engine after a dogfight near Bougainville. She was heavy, he said, but she got me home. That's all that mattered. For men like Bong and McGuire, the aircraft became more than a weapon. It was a companion, an extension of instinct. They personalized them with nose art, names, and markings: Marge, Pudgy, Peck's bad boy. Each Lightning bore a fragment of its pilot's life. Inside those cockpits, miles above sea and jungle, courage wasn't always loud. Sometimes it was quiet, a hand steadying on a control yoke, trusting in metal and mathematics to carry them through. The P-38 was more than the sum of its parts. It was a statement of what American engineering could become when creativity outran convention. Kelly Johnson's methods would become a blueprint for the future: small teams, rapid prototyping, minimal bureaucracy, relentless testing. This mindset would evolve into the Skunk Works philosophy, the same system that would, decades later, give birth to the U-2 spy plane, the SR-71 Blackbird, and the F-117 Nighthawk. Each of those legends carried the same DNA as the Lightning: radical design. Born from necessity and protected by discipline. Johnson's approach to innovation changed how the military thought about design itself. He proved that a handful of people, given freedom and responsibility, could outpace entire bureaucracies. The Lightning was not just a machine of war, it was a classroom for innovation. When asked years later which aircraft he was most proud of, Johnson didn't name the secret jets or the black projects. He simply said, "The P-38, because that's where we learned how to build the impossible." By 1943, the Lightning had become both symbol and sword, a technological marvel powered by the imagination of a man who had never flown in combat, but its defining moment, the mission that would turn it from a weapon into a legend, was yet to come. It would begin not with a battle, but with a secret order. April 18, 1943. Bougainville, Solomon Islands. The morning sky was pale, brushed with the thin haze of dawn on a small coral airstrip at Guadalcanal. 2 squadrons of P-38 Lightning sat in silence, their engines ticking softly in the humid air. Ground crews moved quietly, loading ammunition, checking fuel tanks, fastening the long-range drop tanks beneath each wing. There was no chatter, no music, only focus. Each pilot carried a single folded piece of paper on it, typed in red letters. Was the most secret mission yet assigned to the U.S. Army Air Forces. The order came directly from Admiral Chester Nimitz: intercept and destroy Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, the architect of Pearl Harbor. The man who had once promised to run wild for 6 months was coming to inspect frontline units near Bougainville. American cryptographers had broken Japan's naval code and uncovered the exact route, time, and escort strength of his flight, but to reach him required an aircraft with near impossible range, more than 600 miles each way, across open ocean. Only one fighter could do it: the P-38 Lightning. Kelly Johnson's design had never been tested like this before. This mission would push the limits of endurance, navigation, and stealth. It was a 6-hour round trip through enemy-controlled airspace, where a single mistake meant death or capture. At dawn, 18 Lightnings lifted from the coral strip, twin tails flashing in the early light. Their drop tanks full, their radios silent. Among them were Major John W. Mitchell, leading the mission, and Captain Thomas Lanphier, one of the best shots in the theater. They flew low, very low, barely 50 feet above the water to avoid radar detection for 2.5 hours. They skinned the Pacific surface, engines humming in synchronized rhythm. The tension was unbearable. Fuel gauges dropped slowly. Sweat beaded under helmets. The ocean stretched endless and silent below them. Then, right on schedule, the Japanese formation appeared. 2 Mitsubishi G-4M Betty bombers and 6-0 escorts. Yamamoto's aircraft was easy to identify, marked by its long tail and polished fuselage. Mitchell gave a brief signal. The formation split. 4 P-38s climbed sharply to engage the escorting Zeros, while the others streaked toward the bombers. Lanphier dove first. He fired a short burst. Tracers ripped through the morning air. The first bomber's right engine exploded. Trailing smoke, it began to roll, then broke apart over the jungle canopy. Seconds later, Rex Barber, flying just behind, aimed at the second bomber. He fired from 200 yards. The concentrated nose guns tore through its fuselage. The aircraft burst into flames and spiraled into the dense green below. Within minutes, the sky was empty again. The Lightning pilots turned for home. Engines throttled back to conserve fuel behind them, deep in the Bougainville jungle. The wreckage of Yamamoto's bomber burned. The man who had orchestrated Pearl Harbor was dead, killed by the very precision and range that Kelly Johnson had built into his design. The mission, codenamed Operation Vengeance, was one of the most audacious intercepts in aviation history. No Allied fighter had ever flown such a long-range assassination mission. Every element, from cryptography to tactics, depended on the P-38's unique capabilities, its endurance, speed, and concentrated firepower. When the surviving pilots landed back on Guadalcanal, their tanks were nearly dry. Some engines sputtered as they taxied to a halt. They had been in the air for over 5 hours, deep inside enemy territory, and not a single aircraft had been lost. News of the operation was classified for months, but when it finally reached Washington, even the skeptics were silent. The Lightning had done what no other aircraft could. For Kelly Johnson, the mission was vindication, proof that design could be destiny. His twin-boom creation, once dismissed as impractical, had changed the course of the Pacific War with a single precise strike. But for the pilots who flew that day, it was something deeper, a reminder of how fragile triumph could be. They had risked everything in silence, guided only by trust in their machine and in each other. That combination, man and idea, had turned an aircraft into an instrument of history. And yet, the P-38's legend was still being written. Its deadliest and most decisive battles were still ahead, over the steaming jungles of New Guinea, the volcanic peaks of the Philippines, and the final approach to Tokyo itself. The success of Operation Vengeance sent shockwaves across the Pacific. Japanese morale faltered, American confidence soared. And the P-38 Lightning suddenly found itself at the center of every major air operation. It had gone from a specialized interceptor to a strategic weapon, the tool for missions no other fighter could perform. But triumph carried its own burden. The demands on Lightning pilots intensified every new front. New Guinea, the Bismarck Sea, the Philippines, tested the aircraft's resilience and the men's endurance. In New Guinea's tropical furnace, ground crews battled heat, humidity, and corrosion. Engines overheated, superchargers faltered, and jungle airstrips chewed through landing gear. Yet, day after day, the P-38s took off, climbing into skies so thick with moisture they looked painted in haze. It was here that Major Richard Bong began his historic run, a quiet, humble pilot from Wisconsin. Bong had a natural feel for the aircraft. He flew the Lightning like an extension of his own body, never wasting a movement, never taking unnecessary risks. Between December 1942 and December 1944, he scored 40 confirmed aerial victories, becoming America's top-scoring ace. His tactics mirrored the Lightning's design philosophy: patience, precision, and power. Bong didn't dogfight unless forced to. He struck from above, using the aircraft's speed to choose the terms of every engagement. The Lightning, he once said, lets you decide when to fight. Other pilots followed his lead. Major Thomas McGuire matched Bong's discipline, earning 38 victories before his fatal crash in early 1945. They defined what the P-38 could do in skilled hands and what it demanded of those who flew it. For Kelly Johnson, each victory and each loss carried personal weight. He read every field report, noting each improvement or failure. When Bong's squadron reported engine detonation problems at high manifold pressures, Johnson ordered changes in the turbo supercharger design. When pilots complained of cockpit heat in the Pacific, he had insulation and improved ventilation added. It wasn't just maintenance, it was evolution in real time. And evolution was needed by 1944. The war was changing. The P-51 Mustang, lighter, faster, and easier to maintain, began arriving in theater. It could escort bombers all the way to Berlin and back. The Lightning, once unmatched, faced new competition. But in the Pacific, its dominance remained. The vast distances still belonged to the twin-engine machine. No single-engine fighter could fly as far, hit as hard, or endure as much punishment in missions across the Bismarck archipelago. Lightnings escorted bombers deep into Japanese territory, destroyed airfields, strafed shipping lanes, and ambushed enemy bombers before they even reached altitude. Their most striking display came in late 1944 during the Battle of Leyte Gulf, the largest naval engagement in history. P-38s flew relentless patrols, striking Japanese convoys and defending invasion beaches. They attacked shipping convoys, cut off supply routes, and hunted enemy reconnaissance aircraft. Their presence gave American forces near total control of the sky. By early 1945, as the Allies advanced toward Okinawa, the Lightning's silhouette had become iconic, the twin booms gleaming against tropical sunlight, the nose cannon flashing in short surgical bursts. Every flight carried the ghost of Johnson's design desk. Each mission reaffirmed the same idea: innovation wasn't just about machines. It was about courage filtered through engineering. As the war neared its end, the Lightning adapted once more, this time as a photo reconnaissance platform, stripped of guns and painted sky blue. The F-5 variant carried cameras instead of cannons. These unarmed aircraft flew alone over enemy territory, photographing cities, fortifications, and islands to prepare invasion maps. They were some of the most dangerous missions of the war. No escorts, no weapons, just speed and stealth. Pilots joked that flying an F-5 was like carrying a camera to a gunfight. But their work was essential. The detailed aerial imagery they produced guided bomber raids, naval strikes, and even the atomic missions that would end the war. By the summer of 1945, the Lightning had flown in every major theater: Europe, the Mediterranean, the Aleutians, the Pacific. It had intercepted bombers over Iceland and destroyed shipping near Borneo. Its design had transcended the purpose it was built for. And behind every flight, every mission, was the quiet signature of Kelly Johnson, a man who, without ever firing a shot, had reshaped the geometry of air warfare. The war was ending, but the Lightning story wasn't over yet. Its aftermath, both in technology and in memory, would outlast the conflict it was built to fight. When the guns finally fell silent in 1945, the P-38 Lightning stood among the great machines that had defined the war. More than 10,000 had been built, each one a fusion of raw engineering and combat necessity. They had served in every major campaign, from the first skirmishes over New Guinea to the final sweeps over Tokyo Bay. But victory carried its quiet toll. Many lightnings were left scattered across the Pacific, their aluminum frames corroding under jungle rain, their engines silenced beneath vines and moss for every ace who returned home. Dozens of pilots had vanished without a trace, lost to weather, fatigue, or simple mechanical failure over miles of endless ocean. Official records credited the P-38 with destroying over 1,800 Japanese aircraft in the Pacific, more than any other U.S. Army Air Force's fighter type. It had escorted bombers farther, struck deeper, and endured longer than any of its contemporaries. Its name became synonymous with reach and resilience. For Kelly Johnson, that meant something personal when he walked through the Lockheed plant after VJ Day. The assembly lines were quiet. The workers who had once lived by his deadlines were gone. And the hangars echoed with memory. The war was over. But the legacy of his lightning was only beginning to unfold. The U.S. Army Air Forces, soon to become the U.S. Air Force, recognized that the P-38 had opened a door, not just to victory, but to a new philosophy of design. Its lessons fed directly into the next generation of aircraft. The twin-engine P-80 Shooting Star, America's first operational jet fighter, carried Johnson's fingerprints on every rivet. Yet the Lightning itself still had work to do in the months following Japan's surrender. P-38s flew humanitarian and reconnaissance missions across the Pacific. They mapped islands, delivered supplies, and photographed post-war devastation across Japan and Southeast Asia. In Europe, surviving squadrons continued to serve during the immediate occupation, scouting routes and providing security over newly liberated territories. But even as it continued to fly, the P-38 was quietly fading. Jet propulsion was emerging, and piston-engine fighters, no matter how advanced, were becoming relics. The Lightning's time was ending, replaced by sleeker, faster aircraft that could climb beyond 40,000 feet. Still, the P-38's design had proven something profound, that innovation could arise not from endless committees or cautious tradition, but from one individual's clear vision. Kelly Johnson had built his masterpiece with limited tools, under impossible timelines, using slide rules, courage, and instinct. His work had also changed Lockheed forever. The small experimental hangar where the Lightning was born became a permanent division. The legendary Skunk Works, its motto, quick, quiet, quality, grew directly out of Johnson's wartime experience. From those same walls would later emerge the U-2, SR-71, and F-117, each descended in spirit from the Lightning's twin tails. In the years after the war, many P-38s were scrapped. Their aluminum melted down to build homes in peacetime. Machinery, but a few survived, restored by museums and private collectors, their polished wings gleaming again under open skies when veterans gathered at reunions. They still looked upward instinctively at the sound of twin engines, searching for that unmistakable silhouette. One recalled, "You never forget the sound. It's like two hearts beating together." For a generation of pilots, the Lightning wasn't just an aircraft, it was a promise fulfilled, the proof that American design and determination could meet any challenge. But beyond its numbers and victories lay something deeper, a symbol of an era when the balance between human skill and mechanical genius defined the very edge of war. And in that delicate balance, one man's idea had proven stronger than fear, faster than doubt. As the post-war world settled into an uneasy peace, the Lightning's influence rippled far beyond the airfields it once dominated. Its design principles, twin-engine safety, turbo-supercharged power, long-range endurance, became a blueprint for generations of engineers who followed. Kelly Johnson, still in his 30s, was no longer just an aeronautical engineer. He had become a legend, the man who could make the impossible fly. His success with the P-38 earned him the trust of generals and the freedom to pursue ideas no one else dared to attempt within a decade. He would design aircraft that could touch the edge of space, but he never forgot where it all began. Whenever journalists asked him which aircraft meant the most to him, Johnson's answer was always quiet, almost nostalgic. The Lightning was special. It was the first time we proved that the engineer's pencil could change the outcome of a war. In a sense, he was right. The P-38 had shifted not only the balance of air power, but the philosophy of design itself before the Lightning. Fighters were built for dogfights, short, violent bursts of agility. The P-38 introduced endurance, versatility, and precision as weapons of their own. It was the first American fighter truly built for a global war. The Allies' victory had depended on technology that could stretch across oceans. Without the Lightning's ability to escort bombers and strike targets at unprecedented range, the Pacific War might have dragged on far longer, costing thousands more lives. Historians would later call the P-38 the Pacific King, and with reason. It dominated skies that broke lesser machines. For many veterans, the aircraft became a symbol of survival. Pilots who had flown over jungle, ocean, and endless sky carried the memory with reverence. Decades later, restorations brought a few of the original airframes back to life, sleek, gleaming silver birds returning to flight after 50 years of silence when they took off again. The roar of their twin Allison engines carried the sound of history reborn. At air shows, crowds still pause when they hear that deep, distinctive tone, a duet of precision unlike any other to the trained ear. It's not just noise, it's memory made mechanical. But perhaps the greatest legacy of the Lightning wasn't its battlefield record. It was its proof of concept, that bold ideas, when executed with discipline and courage, could change the world. Kelly Johnson's Skunk Works became the embodiment of that spirit. The same creative isolation and speed that produced the Lightning would go on to produce the U-2 spy plane, the SR-71 Blackbird, and later, the F-117 Nighthawk, all revolutionary in their time. Each one carrying the DNA of the twin-boomed fighter that started it all. When Johnson retired in 1975, he left behind not just designs, but a philosophy, one rooted in wartime necessity and human trust. Give a good man the tools and freedom to work, he wrote, and he'll build you miracles. In the decades since, engineers have studied the Lightning not as a relic, but as a case study in creative risk. Every sharp angle, every curve of its nacelle, every constraint it overcame tells a story of innovation under pressure, of engineering at war with time. The P-38 proved that the line between dream and weapon could be drawn by hand and flown into history. And though the jet age would eventually eclipse it, the Lightning remains immortal in one truth. It was the machine that made speed and precision one and the same. Its twin engines may have fallen silent, but its echo still hums in every aircraft designed for range, power, and purpose. And in that echo, the hand of Kelly Johnson still guides the sky. History remembers its heroes in many forms: soldiers, leaders, and sometimes the quiet minds who never stepped onto the battlefield. Clarence Kelly Johnson was one of them. He never wore wings, never fired a gun, yet his creation, the P-38 Lightning, became the weapon that shaped skies across two oceans. In a war defined by mass and destruction, the Lightning represented something different. Precision. It wasn't born from committees or caution, but from conviction. Johnson had looked at the chaos of 1937 and designed order into it. Symmetry, speed, balance, where others saw risk. He saw possibility, and where others hesitated, he built. Every rivet on the Lightning carried a fragment of that philosophy. It flew not just because of physics, but because of faith. Faith in engineering, in daring, and in the belief that one idea, perfectly executed, could tip the balance of a global war. Its twin booms became the signature of American ingenuity. Its long range gave Allied pilots reach over enemy waters once thought untouchable. Its pilots, Bong, McGuire, Gentile, and hundreds more, became living proof of what design could empower. And when the war ended, the Lightning left behind more than victories. It left a way of thinking that progress demands risk, and mastery begins where comfort ends. Kelly Johnson's career after the P-38 would produce icons, the U-2, the SR-71, and others that pushed the limits of altitude and speed, yet none carried the same heart as his first triumph. The Lightning had been born in crisis, flown through chaos, and endured long enough to become legend. Today, when a restored P-38 takes flight, sunlight gleaming off its silver wings, it's not just a machine in motion. It's the echo of an era when innovation was survival, when every design was a gamble, and every success a victory for imagination itself. Because in the end, the story of the P-38 Lightning isn't just about war or metal. It's about the man who proved that courage doesn't always wear a uniform. Sometimes it carries a pencil.